Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Learning with Jelly. So, today we are going to go through a mini crash course all about the PROC step in SAS. Now, if you haven't watched my previous video about the data step, I highly encourage that you watch that video first before diving into this one. SAS PROC steps are going to be all about procedures that we can run in the SAS programming language. So, let's get started. So, our agenda for today, we are going to just do a brief introduction to the proc step and learn that syntax on how we can actually code it. We're going to talk about the execution order of the different statements within that one step. And then we're going to touch some common procedures to help get you started. And those procedures are going to be PROC Print, where you can print out a whole report, PROC Sort, where you can sort your data, PROC Means is going to give you some nice summary statistics, and PROC Freak to give you frequencies of two categorical variables. So let's get started. Let's talk about this PROC syntax. PROC steps are procedures. That's what the PROC stands for. So they're going to help you perform tasks. They can help you get out visuals. They can do statistical tests. They can get out summary statistics. They can print reports. All of these are considered procedures in SAS. The basic syntax on the screen is that you're going to start with the keyword proc and then the procedure name. So in the example that you see here on the right hand side, I have proc print. Print is the procedure name. And then I feed it in some data. So in this case, I'm using a data set, sashelp.cars, which you all have access to within the SAS Help library if you're using SAS on demand for academics or base SAS. And then once I feed it some data and hit run, I'm going to get out a printed report in this example. So pretty easy. Note that procedures and steps have statements. So in this case, every statement ends with a semicolon. And we talked about that in the previous video. So in this case, the proc print is a statement and it has a semicolon at the end. Run has a semicolon and quit has a semicolon. Procedures or proc steps follow data steps many times. So you can use a data step for filtering, creating new variables, and then you can run a procedure based off of that data step. It's great for data analysis and manipulation. So as I mentioned in our agenda, it's going to be able to sort data. You can get out statistical summaries such as the mean, median, standard deviation, and you also can make models and a whole lot more. So let's talk about the execution order. So proc statements are going to execute first along with any options. So in this case, I have my proc sort statement, this entire line. And here the name of the procedure is sort. I'm feeding it some data, which is sastutorials. And one of the options that I have within this statement is to output to a new data set called car sorted. Okay? If you have a buy statement, the buy statement is always going to execute before the where statement. So in this case, my next statement is buy drivetrain. So I want to sort this data based off of the type of drive that this car has. It's like a grouping variable. And so it's going to execute this buy statement first. And then I'm only filtering the data set to look at cars that were made in Asia. So the buy statement will come and execute before the where statement. Keep in mind that some procedures need to have sorted data going into them first before they can run and give you the correct output. And this is why proc sort is so important, because sometimes you have to sort the data first before you're able to do things like a proc means, a proc print, a proc rank. Okay. And we're going to look a little bit further into proc sort later on, but this is the execution order. It's going to execute that procedure statement and all the options within that procedure statement. If you have a buy variable, that will execute next before any type of filtering using that where statement. Okay, so we talked about the basic syntax where we have proc, whatever the procedure name is, and then we feed it some data where it says data equal data set. Now let's talk about some common procedures that you may encounter. So that first procedure is going to be PROC Print. So PROC Print is exactly what it says. It prints out a display of data. So it's going to print out like a little mini report for you. And this is a great procedure in order to check what you're doing as you code. I use a lot of PROC Print when I want to make sure things turned out correctly. So the basic syntax here is going to be PROC Print data equals whatever your data set name is, and of course, in that with a semicolon. There's tons of options that you can use within PROC Print. The no obs option, where you can suppress the observation numbers, you can round variables, you can have labels, this double, all of this good stuff that you can add into PROC Print. And we're going to see that in our interface momentarily. And there are several optional statements. You can use a by statement, as we just saw in the PROC Sort. You can use a var statement, which tells you what variables you actually want to print out. You also can use a where statement for filtering and a whole lot more. So in this example, built in from the previous procedure that we have, I did a PROC sort and I wanted to sort by drivetrain. And I filtered for where origin equals Asia, and it outputted a temporary data set for me called cars underscore sorted. So now I want to print that out in a report. So I'm going to take that output data set, cars underscore sorted, and I'm going to pass it into my proc print as the data equals. I'm going to do no obs, which means get rid of the observation numbers. And blank line equals 1 tells me I want to skip one line in between my observations. I'm also going to print it out based off of drivetrain. And I only want to show 3 variables in this report: the type of car it is, the manufacturer suggested retail price, which is MSRP, and drivetrain. So let's actually go into SAS and type this out. And if you don't have SAS on demand for academics, you can sign up for a free account. Just go to SAS.com. You can look at my first video, which is going to be in the description below, on how to get started using SAS on demand for academics. Okay, so if I hit libraries on the left-hand side of my screen and I expand the SAS help library, I see my cars data set. So let's just take a look at that. I'm going to double click on it and it's going to pop up in a new screen. So here I have the make and the model of the car, and I have that variable drivetrain where it's all front, rear, etc. I also see that I have the origin where the car was made, Asia, Europe, the United States, and I have the manufacturer suggested retail price as well. So let's go ahead and run this proc sort. So keep in mind that I'm going to do proc sort data equals sashelp.cars. Sashelp is just the library that it was in. If you don't include sashelp, it's going to look for it in your work library and throw an error because there isn't any in your work library. The output data set, however, is going to be stored in your work library, which is cars underscore sorted. We want to sort this by drivetrain, and we only want to look at cars in Asia. So let's highlight this and run it. And here is the result. If I scroll all the way over to origin, I see that it is in Asia. And if I look at my drivetrain, notice that it's in alphabetical order, where it has all, because it starts with an A, then front, because it starts with an F. And then those are the 2 main drivetrains for cars made in Asia. All right, so I'm going to just expand my libraries on the left-hand side, expand work. In your work, you should see this output data set, cars underscore sorted. Now, in SAS On Demand for Academics, if you do not output this to a data set, it will throw an error because it thinks you're trying to overwrite the built-in data set. So when you look at log, it gives you an error. User does not have appropriate authorization level. So make sure that you actually output this to a data set that you can use. So I'm going to call out equals cars underscore sorted. Okay, so after I sort my data, now I'm going to print. And I'm just going to comment out these lines here. Okay. So in this case, I have PROC Print data equals cars sorted because that was the output data set that we just created. I don't want any observation numbers. I want to print it out by drivetrain. So I should see all in front in here. And I only want to print out three variables, the drivetrain, the type, and the MSRP. So this var statement is just going to list the variables that you want to show. And we're going to talk about these titles and footnotes later on. So I'm going to run this, and this is what I get. So my report has the drivetrain equals all, and then it has drivetrain equals front, and it gives me in drivetrain equals rear. So it gives me exactly what I wanted in a nice little report. And you can add tons of bells and whistles to this. Okay, so let's hop back into the presentation. Okay, so that was that PROC print. Now, as you saw when we were in SAS On Demand for Academics, I had some comments in front of the title and footnote statement. That's because this is the slide that shows you how to add titles and footnotes. So also within PROC Print, I can add a title if I'm actually printing out a report. And the title here says Asia Drivetrain Type Report. And I also can add footnotes. This footnote says made for the finance department. So you can add as many titles and footnotes as you want. PROC Print has a lot of options. You can change the column width. You can change columns to be called by their labels. You can change colors. There's so many things that you can do to create the report. So you're definitely going to want to look at that documentation to get that. But let's look at these two. So I'm going to uncomment title. And in this case, I'm calling it title 1 in footnote. And I'm going to run that same PROC print. And here you see I have my title at the top, Asia Drivetrain Type Report. And at the bottom, I have a nice little formatted footnote made for finance department. Now, if you notice, I have this title right before the procedure, and it's called CARS Report. So say, for instance, I don't put a title on my actual reports, it's going to assume that for every report that I run, I'm just going to use this generic title, CARS Report. So if I run this, I see now I have CARS Report, okay? So you can also set titles and footnotes outside of the procedure statement. For any procedures that you run after you set the title and footnote, it's going to be that same title. Okay. So once again, PROC print, you're going to feed it in some data. If you want to do some grouping, you're going to use the by statement. The var statement, you're going to list out what columns you actually want to print in the report. And you can also choose to add titles and footnotes. Okay, so let's hop right back and look at our next procedure. So our next procedure is going to be the PROC Sort, if I'm not mistaken. So the PROC Sort procedure, you are going to use this procedure when you want to sort data by whatever variable you have in your by statement. The basic syntax you see on this screen is going to be PROC sort because sort is the name of the procedure. Data equals whatever data set you want to run into it. We output a new data set and we can sort it by a particular variable. In the example here, we have our PROC sort and we're sorting it by the make of the car. There are lots of options that you can do inside of PROC sort. No dupe key gets rid of duplicates in the by variable. So in this case, if I have any duplicate makes in this data set, it's going to drop the duplicates and just take the first observation that has that make. Dupe out is going to put all of your duplicates in a data set and tons of more options. You can sort in ascending or descending order. And as I mentioned before, if you want to use by statements in PROC Means or PROC Print, you must sort the data by that same variable. So let's actually look at PROC Sort within SAS On Demand for Academics. And let's just remind ourselves what that CARS data set is. So looking at this CARS data set, I have tons of makes, you can see. Now I want to use the PROC Sort, and I'm going to use the PROC Sort. Let me scroll right back down. And in this case, I'm going to feed it the SAS data set, and I'm going to do no dupe key. So it's going to get rid of all the duplicates, and it's going to put it into a temporary data set called cars underscore no dupe make. And it's going to get rid of any duplicate makes. So let's go ahead and run this and see what the output looks like. So notice that it's a lot shorter, okay? I only have 38 rows in this case, whereas in the original one, I have 428 rows, okay? Because it got rid of the duplicates based off of make. So you see, I only have one row for Acura, one row for Audi, one row for BMW, et cetera, et cetera. And it wouldn't make sense to get rid of duplicates in this case, but maybe you have duplicate customer IDs and you only want to take their first transaction. Maybe you have duplicates in your data set when it comes to the financials being repeated. So, this is a good way to check for duplicates as well. So, that is the great old PROC sort. Okay. All right. So, let's go back to our presentation and continue. And our next procedure is going to be one of my favorite procedures. If you're doing any type of data exploration, you want to get statistical summaries. You need to know the mean, the median, the standard deviation, how many observations exist within the data set, quantiles, percentiles, confidence levels, confidence limits. All of that you're able to do with a PROC means. It's like a powerful statistics procedure packaged in one. So, PROC means are going to give us that descriptive summary statistics, and you're going to use it predominantly for continuous numeric variables. So, things like height, weight, BMI, numeric variables that's on a wide spectrum. And the syntax that you see here is going to be PROC means is the name of the procedure, data equals data set, and var, whatever variable you want to get the summary statistics of. So there's a lot of options in PROC means. There's the missing option where it's going to use missing values to compute summary statistics. So that means if you are going to get the average of something and you have one missing value and three complete values, it's still going to do the average divided by 4 instead of divided by 3 because the missing values count as an actual value. So you can use that as an option. You can call many summary statistics or statistical measures, such as min for minimum, mean, P95 in this case means the 95th percentile, standard deviation. If you see N, that is just a raw count, and more. You have where you can round the numbers. So NDEC allows you to round it to a certain number of decimal points as well. So in this case, I see PROC means the data is equal to whatever data set I'm using, and we're still working on that cars data set. And I want to get the mean, the median, the standard deviation, the number of observations in the data set, and I want to round it to 2 decimal places. The VAR that I'm interested in is manufacturer suggested retail price because price is that continuous numeric variable. And when I run it, I get this output that you see on the right, where it looks like the mean price for the car is $32,774. The median is about 27,000. The standard deviation in this case is about 19. And the number of observations is 428. So this is a nice procedure. Notice that if I wanted to do PROC means and group this by, let's say, origin, I would need to sort it by origin first. Okay, so our last procedure that we're going to talk about is PROC Freak, which is also a very popular procedure, especially if you're doing things like summary statistics and data exploration. So PROC Freak is used for frequency analysis. How often are these things occurring? And it's great when comparing 2 or more categorical variables. So in this case, what's the frequency between drivetrain and origin, right? And drivetrain has these three columns, all front and rear, and origin has Asia, Europe, and USA. So when you want to compare two categorical variables, this is a great procedure to do. It gives us what we call contingency tables. So the syntax of this is PROC Freak, data equals whatever the data set name is. So you should see a pattern here. It's really just procedure, name of procedure, data equals data set. And the second statement, which is a little bit different than the past procedure, is going to be this tables variable. There are a lot of options that you can put right within the table statement. You can use CL for confidence limits. No call, no row is going to suppress those frequencies. You could use alpha to set your confidence level to perform certain statistical tests and a whole lot more. So in this example that you see here, we have PROC Freak, data equals sashelp.cars. And in the table statement, I have my two categorical variables. I'm doing origin by drivetrain. And I'm using a slash to indicate what options I want. And in this case, I don't want any row frequencies. And then I'm hitting run. And this is what I get out. So I know that front drivetrain cars in Asia are 99 in my data set. I have 99 observations of cars that were made in Asia and have front drivetrain. I have 50 cars that were made in Europe and have rear drivetrain. So this nice frequency procedure allows me to compare these two categorical variables together. So let's hop one last time into SAS Studio. And here is our means procedure that we saw. So in this case, I have PROC Means and I have data equals sastutorials. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And I run that, I get that nice little means procedure. Notice that I can use different, I can also get this by origin. But in order to get it by origin, I have to sort it by origin. So I'm just going to change this sort procedure right above it. And I'm just going to have the output data set be cars underscore sort. So I don't overwrite anything. And I'm going to sort it first. Okay. And then, oh, let's take out this no do key option because then it will only give me 3 observations. Awesome. So I have my data set here that's sorted by origin. And so now I can take that data set and run it into a PROC mean. So I'm going to do cars underscore sort. I'm going to do by origin and still look at the manufacturer suggested retail price. And here you go. You get out 3 little tables. The origin of Asia, the mean MSRP, which is $24,000. Europe looks like it's $48,000 and USA $28,000. So there are some very, very expensive cars in Europe. Okay, so now let's run that PROC Freak that we saw. So I'm just doing PROC Freak and I'm doing the origin by drivetrain. And I get out the nice little contingency table that you see. Okay. So front Europe cars are about 8.64% in the data set. Okay. All right. So let's pop back over one last time and do a nice little recap. Okay, so in summary, PROC steps in SAS helps you carry out procedures. We only talked about a couple in this video, but there are tons of other procedures that I encourage you to go on SAS documentation online to look at all the procedures that you have available for you. But these procedures can create reports, they can give us statistical summaries, they can create models, they can create visuals, and a whole lot more. Some procedures, such as means, print, rank, etc., requires data to be sorted first. So always check your log if you have an error. If the error says data is not sorted, that means that you need to use a PROC sort to sort it. PROC steps are going to be great for exploring, analyzing, and modeling data, as I mentioned before. And you want to be sure to view that SAS documentation for all the different options that you can put within a procedure. So that is our first crash course about all about the PROC step in SAS. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as well as hit that notification button for more tutorials in SAS. And I will see you all in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.